The exact causes remain debated, but evidence points to a combination of factors. Climate change causing reduced Nile floods, overextension of resources on monument building, and growing power of provincial nomarchs who challenged royal authority. Egypt fragmented into competing regions. Nomarchs declared themselves independent rulers. Two major rival dynasties emerged, one based in Heracleopolis in Lower Egypt, another in Thebes in Upper Egypt. For over a century, Egypt endured civil war, famine, and cultural disruption. Literary texts from this period, like the Admonitions of Ipuwer and the Prophecy of Nefertiti, describe social chaos, poverty, and the breakdown of traditional order. While possibly exaggerated for literary effect, they reflect real trauma experienced during this period. Yet, even during this dark age, Egyptian culture persisted. Local rulers built temples, artists created beautiful objects, scribes continued writing. This wasn't a return to barbarism, but a period of political decentralization, during which Egyptian culture actually spread more widely throughout society. Around 2055 BCE, Mentuhotep II, a pharaoh from Thebes in Upper Egypt, finally defeated his rivals and reunified Egypt, establishing the 11th dynasty and inaugurating what historians call the Middle Kingdom. Mentuhotep built an innovative mortuary temple at Deir Bahari, combining pyramid, temple, and tomb in a unique design that influenced later constructions. He presented himself as Egypt's savior, the man who restored Maat, the cosmic order that Egyptians believed was essential for civilization. The 12th dynasty, beginning around 1985 BCE, represents what many scholars consider classical Egyptian civilization. These pharaohs were master administrators who reorganized the government, launched massive irrigation and land reclamation projects, and created efficient bureaucratic systems that would influence all subsequent Egyptian history. Pharaohs like Amenemhat III transformed the Fayum Depression into a productive agricultural region, building dams, canals, and reservoirs in one of history's first large-scale environmental engineering projects. This wasn't just conquest, it was the creation of new land, new wealth, and new possibilities for Egypt's growing population. These pharaohs also built a chain of massive fortresses in Nubia, controlling trade routes and projecting Egyptian power deep into Africa. These weren't simple military outposts, but sophisticated administrative centers with complex layouts, multiple defensive walls, and impressive architectural features. The Middle Kingdom also produced Egypt's greatest literature. The story of Sinuhe, the tale of the shipwrecked sailor, wisdom texts, and love poetry all flourished during this period. Egyptian language evolved to its classical form, the standard that would be taught to scribes for centuries. Middle Kingdom art became more realistic, showing pharaohs with careworn faces rather than idealized perfection. This reflected a more complex view of kingship, acknowledging the burden of rule while maintaining divine status. Around 1650 BCE, central authority collapsed again. But this time, Egypt faced something unprecedented: foreign invasion and occupation. A Semitic people called the Hyksos, meaning rulers of foreign lands, gradually infiltrated the Nile Delta, eventually establishing their own dynasty, ruling from the city of Avaris. They brought new military technology, particularly the horse-drawn chariot, which gave them a decisive advantage. The Hyksos adopted Egyptian culture, worshipped Egyptian gods, and used Egyptian administrative systems. They didn't destroy Egyptian civilization, but ruled as pharaohs themselves, creating a complex cultural hybrid. However, Egyptian
Egyptian dynasties continued to rule in Thebes in the south. For nearly a century, Egypt was divided between Hyksos rulers in the north and native Egyptian rulers in the south, with Nubian kingdoms watching and sometimes intervening from further south. Around 1570 BCE, the Theban pharaoh Sekenenretau began military campaigns against the Hyksos. His mummy shows brutal head wounds, suggesting he died in battle. His sons continued the fight. Amose Aya finally succeeded in expelling the Hyksos around 1550 BCE, pursuing them into Canaan to ensure they couldn't return. He reunified Egypt once again and established the 18th dynasty, inaugurating the new kingdom, Egypt's imperial age. Importantly, the Egyptians learned from their conquerors. They adopted chariot warfare, improved metallurgy, and developed a more militaristic culture. The trauma of foreign occupation transformed Egypt from an inward-looking civilization into an aggressive empire. Through military campaigns north into Syria, Palestine, and south into Nubia, they created the largest territory Egypt would ever control, stretching from the Euphrates River to the fourth cataract of the Nile. Thutmose III, who reigned from approximately 1479 to 1425 BCE, was Egypt's greatest military strategist, personally leading 17 campaigns, conquering numerous cities, and establishing Egyptian dominance throughout the Near East. He's been called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt, though perhaps Napoleon should be called the Thutmose of France. Egypt became fabulously wealthy. Tribute flowed in from conquered territories, gold from Nubia, cedar from Lebanon, horses from Syria, exotic goods from throughout the known world. Egypt's pharaohs corresponded as equals with the kings of Babylon, Assyria, and the Hittites. But perhaps the most remarkable pharaoh of this dynasty was Hatshepsut, one of the few women to rule Egypt as pharaoh rather than queen. She came to power around 1473 BCE, initially as regent for her young stepson, but then declared herself pharaoh, complete with false beard and male regalia. Hatshepsut focused on trade and building rather than conquest. Her famous expedition to the land of Punt, documented in beautiful reliefs at her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, brought back myrrh trees, ebony, ivory, and gold. She built extensively throughout Egypt, creating some of its most beautiful monuments. The 18th dynasty also witnessed one of history's strangest episodes, the religious revolution of Akhenaten. Around 1353 BCE, this pharaoh abandoned traditional Egyptian polytheism, declaring that only one god existed, Aten, the sun disk. He moved the capital to a new city, Akhetaten, modern Amarna, and attempted to erase the old gods from Egyptian consciousness. Akhenaten's revolution produced a distinctive art style, with elongated skulls, curved bodies, and intimate family scenes previously unknown in Egyptian art. But it was deeply unpopular. After his death, his successors systematically destroyed his monuments, erased his name, and returned Egypt to traditional religion. One of those successors was the boy king Tutankhamun, who died young around 1323 BCE. Though relatively unimportant in his own time, his intact tomb, discovered in 1922, gave the world its most complete glimpse of royal burial practices and New Kingdom wealth. The 19th dynasty produced Egypt's most famous pharaoh, Ramesses II, known as Ramesses the Great, who reigned for an astonishing 66 years from 1279 to 1213 BCE.
Ramesses was Egypt's greatest builder, constructing more monuments, statues, and temples than any other pharaoh. His colossal statues dominated the landscape, his cartouches appeared on buildings throughout Egypt, and his mortuary temple, the Ramesseum, was among the largest ever built. His greatest achievement was Abu Simbel, carved directly into a mountainside in Nubia. 4 massive seated statues of Ramesses, each 67 feet tall, guard the entrance to a temple that extends 180 feet into the rock. Twice a year, on specific dates, sunlight penetrates deep into the temple to illuminate statues of the gods in the inner sanctuary, a feat of astronomical and architectural precision. Ramesses also fought the Hittite Empire at the Battle of Kadesh around 1274 BCE, one of the largest chariot battles in history. Though Ramesses claimed total victory in his inscriptions, the battle was actually a stalemate. What's more significant is what followed, the first recorded peace treaty in human history, establishing recognized borders and mutual defense obligations between Egypt and the Hittites. Ramesses lived into his 90s, outliving many of his children and wives. His mummy, discovered in a cache of royal mummies in 1881, shows an elderly man with red hair, arthritic joints, and evidence of dental disease. Even in death, his presence commands respect. But maintaining an empire proved expensive. Later, New Kingdom pharaohs struggled with economic problems, inflation, administrative corruption, and the constant need to defend distant territories. The great building projects became smaller, less frequent, less impressive. Around 1200 BCE, a catastrophe struck the entire eastern Mediterranean. Mysterious groups, collectively called the Sea Peoples, destroyed kingdoms throughout the region. The Hittite Empire collapsed completely. Many Canaanite cities were burned. Egypt barely survived, with Ramesses III fighting off multiple invasions. Ramesses III successfully defended Egypt, but at enormous cost. His reign marked the last period of significant Egyptian power. After his death, Egypt entered a period of slow decline, with the empire gradually fragmenting. The high priests of Ammon in Thebes controlled the south, while various dynasties ruled the north from cities like Tanis. At times, Egypt had multiple pharaohs simultaneously, each claiming legitimacy. Libyan military commanders who had settled in Egypt gradually gained power, eventually establishing their own dynasties. These Libyan pharaohs adopted Egyptian culture completely, proving once again that Egyptian civilization was defined by culture, not ethnicity. The Nubian Renaissance, the 25th dynasty. But the most remarkable development came from the south. The kingdom of Kush in Nubia, which had maintained Egyptian cultural traditions even when Egypt itself declined, invaded and conquered Egypt around 747 BCE. The Nubian pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, particularly Taharqa, presented themselves as restorers of true Egyptian tradition.